The reason why I did that, and I'm sure you probably are relating with one or many of those characters at this point. The reason why I showed that video is because today we're looking at a spiritual practice that is very highly misunderstood in the church. It's fasting, and we've been going through, if you haven't been here, we've been going, of course, through these 12 spiritual practices or disciplines, which are ways in which we are supposed to connect with God on a deeper level. They're not the ways in which we earn God's love or the way in which we get God to care anymore for us, but rather the ways in which we can calm our life, pull back a little bit, and connect with God on a deeper level. Listen to Him, and hear what He has to say for our lives. And fasting, it's a scary topic. It's a hard thing to preach on, to be honest with you. It's a hard thing to hear because, as you can see from the video, there's a lot of misunderstandings of how fasting's applied. And more importantly, there's misunderstandings of why we do fasting. It's a little scary. But fasting, like any of the other disciplines that we go through, fundamentally can be boiled down to this. What can you go without? What can you and I do without in our lives, such that if we did go without it, it might scare us at first, but in the end we will find connecting to the streams of grace that God has for us, connecting to His will, His mind, His heart. And so fasting is very much that. And you know, it's hard to talk about fasting because inevitably, you know, you're going to feel a little guilty. You know, like the legalist said, if you don't do this, God does not approve. And you're probably going to say, well, He's going to ask me to skip lunch today or something like that. I encourage you to eat lunch. Don't skip. Eat lunch today with each other after church. But fasting can be a little scary, can be a little daunting. And so I wanted to look at a narrative, a story of Jesus and His type of fast, and what happens to Him when He fasts, and in the face of fasting, what He does and how we can learn from it, and how the gospel gives us the power and the motivation to fast from something or some things in our life. But first, I wanted to throw out some facts here that fasting can be a little confusing for folks. So let me go through with some caveats first. Let me preempt some concerns about fasting before I get into the actual message. First, and I've said this many times, fasting in the Bible is never commanded. There's no biblical mandate that says you must fast. It doesn't say thou shalt fast. It's just not there. Now, it's not commanded, but the interesting thing about it is that it's expected. If you go back and you look at what Stephen read in Matthew 6, the very first thing Jesus says to them is what? He says, when you fast. It's not if, or it's not in case you fast, or maybe one day you might fast. He says when, and the reason why He says when is because throughout the Bible, it's an expected discipline that people implement into their lives. Never commanded, but totally expected. Secondly, there's many different types of fast. So if you have one guy telling you it's this way, you can only do it this way. You can only do it this way. It has to be 40 days or it has to be 50 days. God forbid you do that. Please don't try it. There's no one way to fast. Throughout the entire Bible, throughout the Old Testament, you see many different types. Daniel, for example, in his moment of crisis, he fasts, but he chooses to eat only vegetables and water. Whereas Esther, in a moment of crisis when her people are on the brink of being obliterated, she says, tell them to fast for 3 days and eat and drink nothing. You can go through every time. The fast is a little bit different. There's long fast, there's short fast, there's fast from food, there's fast from drink, there's fast even from sleep for some people. So there's no one way to do a fast. So don't get stuck into that this morning. But you're going to have to find your own way to fast from the one thing that holds you back right now. Secondly, it's always spiritually focused. Fasting is not meant to lose weight. Fasting is not meant to make yourself feel like a better believer in God or something like that. It's always spiritually focused in the sense that it's always focused on God and not ourselves. Jesus says in Matthew 6:16, He says, when you fast, don't be like the hypocrites, right? He says, so that their fasting may be seen by others. In this time in Jerusalem, fasting was typically held on Mondays and Thursdays. Now, why? Because those were the market days. And those are the days in which you went out into the public circle and you let everybody know that you're fasting. And everybody would ask, why aren't you buying anything? Why aren't you eating anything? And you would tell them, well, I'm fasting today. So these people were choosing the most popular, busy days to go out into the community and remind everybody they're fasting. And Jesus says, don't do that. It's not an external act. Nobody should even know you're fasting for the most part. Jesus says, put oil on your head. He says, basically, wash your face, get color in your face so that people won't know. Because fasting is uniquely between you and God. And then fasting is also connected to giving and praying. If you look at Matthew 6, when Jesus is giving the sermon, he's talking about giving to the poor. And then he talks about prayer, but right sandwiched in the middle is this part about fasting. And almost every commentator says the reason why he does this is because he wants his followers to see that there's an intricate relationship between giving to the poor, praying, and fasting. But by and large, the church these days, we don't have a problem with giving to the poor for the most part. We don't have a problem really with praying. But for some reason, fasting has dropped off the radar. And as we'll see in Jesus' fast, when he's fasting in this story, fasting will give you an incredible resource to deal with temptation and to implement self-control in your life. See, Jesus is doing what theologians call an extraordinary fast. It's for 40 days, and they say, do not ever do that, please. It's not good for you unless, you're the Son of God and you're called to do an extraordinary fast. Our fasts are going to be much smaller, shorter, and much simpler. But Jesus is out in the wilderness. He's led out there right after he's baptized. And the first thing he does is he fasts. He abstains. He draws back. And at this moment, that's when the devil, of course, comes to him to tempt him. And we see an amazing resource in fasting to deal with temptation and to deal with and have self-control in the face of temptation. They're linked today in the story of Jesus, and I want to unpack this for us today. I want us to see what fasting is, but before I even get to that, I want to touch on temptation and self-control, as it is in this story here. If you notice something first about temptation, when the devil comes to Jesus, how does he tempt him? He doesn't take him to the red light district. He doesn't go out and get hammered with Jesus. He doesn't try to tempt him through the things that you and I would think are basic temptations of over living your life, of sex or power or anything like that. He tests him and he tempts him in the simple things, in the good things. See, the first thing he says here is he offers him food. Nothing's wrong with that. He offers him safety. Nothing's wrong with that. He offers him control. And nothing's wrong with that. See, temptation for us, I know a lot of you may be wrestling with temptation in some regard. Temptation does come in the big things. Temptation can come in the biggies, the things that you know are going to make you fall and trip and go down in a downward spiral. But, and more often than not, you see temptation come in as a whisper. It comes in as a good thing that you and I turn into the ultimate things. Jesus had every right to take the bread. He was hungry, and nothing is wrong with bread. Bread is good. You're going to eat it after service. But the devil was saying, take this small thing. It's a good thing. But soon enough, you're going to make it into the ultimate thing, and it will be the thing that pulls you away from a relationship with God. Now, for each of us this morning, it's something. Something has crept in the back door. Some whisper of a good thing in your life has become the ultimate thing. The thing you can't put down. The thing you can't turn off. The thing you can't leave. The thing you can't go without. For some people, it may be food and drink. But for others, it's much more insidious. See, the devil doesn't tempt you necessarily in the big things, in the main things, but in the plain things. There's a quote by Arthur Leonard Griffith, a Christian writer, and he puts it much more poetically than I do. He says, Satan tempts us at the point of our physical needs, not that we might gratify them to excess, but that we might think of nothing else and satisfy them at the expense of our usefulness in the world. Satan tempts us at the point of our ambitions, not that we might engage in positive evil, but that we might simply accept the fact of evil. Learn to live with it. Come to terms with it. And maintain a quiet reverence in the presence of it. See, Satan tempts us at the point of our religion, not that we might disbelieve in God, but that we might demand certainty. That type of certainty of God that leaves nothing to faith, nothing to God himself. These are the moral struggles that have reality for people such as we are. The subtle temptation to renounce our duty in favor of what is attractive, that insidious allurement to a kind of half-goodness, which is the essence of everything bad. See what he says here? Satan's going to tempt you into a half-goodness, a numbness. You won't even realize what the thing that started out as a good thing has become ultimate in your life. You can't put it down now. You can't turn it off. You can't walk away from it. It used to be good, but now it's overcome you. And it's so easy to miss these things in our life. I put another quote in here from C.S. Lewis, and I've been fasting, by the way, from quoting C.S. Lewis, as you might know, for like 3 months, and I'm famished, so I'm going to quote him again. I've been fasting from him, but he says it this way. There's a part in his book, The Great Divorce, when the narrator's asking his host, who's sort of an angelic being, he's saying, but nothing's really wrong with natural affection. Having an affection for somebody is not really all that wrong. What's so wrong about that? And he says here, there's something in natural affection which will lead it on to eternal love more easily than natural appetite could be led on. So he says, natural affection can lead to eternal love. That's a good thing. But there's also something in it which makes it easier to stop at the natural level and mistake it for the heavenly. Brass is mistaken for gold more easily than clay is. And if it finally refuses conversion, its corruption will be worse than the corruption of what ye call the lower passions. It is a stronger angel, and therefore when it falls, a fiercer devil. He says it's a stronger angel. The very good things in your life that you uphold, he says here, natural affection. Brass can look more like gold than clay is. And this is exactly the way the devil tries to tempt Jesus in this story. He does not go to him with blatant sins. He goes to him with the good. And he says, Jesus, make this the ultimate. That's how he tempts him. But then Jesus shows amazing self-control. How does he show such amazing self-control? Well, if you're familiar with the story, then you'll know that he keeps repeating the same thing. He keeps saying, it is written, it is written. Every time Satan tempts him, the devil tempts him, he says, it is written, it is written. What is he doing? Yes, he's quoting Scripture. And in the face of temptation, that's fine to do, for you to quote Scripture in the face of temptation. But it's much deeper than that. What Jesus is doing is he's reminding himself of the truth of God, even when, and most often when, the truth of God does not seem real. He's saying, listen, I'm hungry. My physical needs are taking over. There's bread right in front of me. That's truth. That's reality. But he says, I won't go for that because I know it's a mirage. I'll revert back to my first beliefs. See, he doesn't just blindly quote Scripture. That's great to handle, and if you're in the face of temptation and you want to recite a Bible verse and it helps you, good. But what Jesus is doing, he's planting down firmly. He's basically saying, I can't see it right now. It's not there, but I know God is true. He has been my whole life, and I will remember that at this moment, when all else looks like I could take this thing in front of me, I'll go back to the truth. I'll plant. Now, if you've been here any number of messages of mine, whenever I talk about self-control, I dust out this same illustration, and until a better piece of literature comes along to explain self-control, I'm going to keep using it. So if you want to write a book and better than Jane Eyre, you can do it, and I'll use that. But for now, I'm going to use this. You remember this scene? I described it before, and maybe you haven't read it. Rochester and Jane are in love, and it's plain Jane. Remember, she has no prospects, no chances really. Rochester and her are in love. She finds out Rochester's married. Temptation. And Rochester says, listen, come, be my mistress. It doesn't matter, just do this. We love each other. My marriage is just a facade, basically, he's saying. And there's this really emotional part where he leans in and she says, he says, you really don't want to do this? She says, I do. I want to get away. And he leans closer into her and he says, now? And she says, I do. And she's maintaining. And he leans and he sort of starts to kiss her a little bit. And she says, I do. And she's staying so true, so true. And then she says this, I was experiencing an ordeal. A hand of fiery iron grasped my vitals. Temptation, terrible moment. Full of struggle, blackness burning. Not a human being that ever lived could wish to be loved better than I was loved. And him who thus loved me, I absolutely worshipped. And I must renounce love and idol. One drear word comprised my intolerable duty, depart. Still indomitable was the reply, I care for myself. The more solitary, the more friendless, the more unsustained I am, the more I will respect myself. And here's what she does that Jesus doesn't when he quotes scripture. I will keep the law given by God, sanctioned by man. I will hold to the principles received by me when I was sane and not mad as I am now. Laws and principles are not for the times when there is no temptation. They are for such moments as this, when body and soul rise in mutiny against their rigor. Stringent are they, inviolate they shall be. If at my individual convenience I might break them, what would be their worth? They have a worth. So I have always believed. And if I cannot believe it now, it is because I am insane, quite insane. With my veins running fire and my heart beating faster than I can count its throbs, preconceived opinions, foregone determinations are all I have at this hour to stand by. There I plant my foot. You see what Jane is doing? She's planting. She says, at this moment, this is when laws are for. This is when you apply the truth, is in the face of temptation, not when temptation's not there. And you and I are going to have to do this when the good things in our life become the ultimate things. The strong angels fall and become fiercer devils. This is when you have to have a Jane Eyre moment, when you have to have a Jesus moment to plant the foot, to say, I will see the truth right now. Even if I can't really see it, I'll remind myself of it. And Jesus does it so beautifully in the face of temptation. But how? You probably now definitely do feel guilty, and I've talked this whole time and haven't really even talked about fasting, and you're saying, what does fasting have to do with any of this? But do you notice when all of this happens? Do you notice how Jesus gets through it? It's because he was fasting. Fasting for Jesus and fasting for the Christian community is a way to say, I can go without this, and God will be stronger for it. It's a way to say, I can give up anything in my life. Any of the good things, the angels that have become the devils, I can give them up. I can put it down. I can turn it off. I can walk away. I can plant my foot. And fasting is what lets you do that. Fasting is the margins in your life. It's drawing back and saying, I can go without whatever this may be because I have something much, much better ahead. Let me explain what I mean by that. If you go to Matthew 9, chapter 9, there's another time that Jesus talks about fasting. But in this time, he talks about it in a very different way, and a very cryptic way, but in a very gospel-centered way. He's with his disciples, and they're all eating on the Sabbath day. And all these people are coming up to him and saying, why aren't your disciples fasting? And he has this really weird, cryptic answer for them. And they say, your disciples aren't fasting like John's are. What's wrong with them? God does not approve. And Jesus, of course, I'm paraphrasing, looks at them and he says, they're not fasting because they have the bridegroom with them now. But there will come a time when they must fast. And you scratch your head going, what are you talking about? And what Jesus is directly pointing to is the fact that the bridegroom, him, was going to go to the cross and they were going to lose him. He was going to give his life for them. He says, now they have me. Soon you won't. Then you'll know what fasting is like. Then you'll know what it means to go without. He's pointing to something. And you and I see this fulfilled in the book of Revelation, chapter 19. Jesus is pointing to the cross when he says, listen, right now they have me. Soon they won't. I have to go die for them. I have to go die for you, to show you and to get you in to the ultimate feast of all time. In Revelation 19, it says, blessed are those who come into the marriage supper of the Lord. What God is saying to you and me this morning, he's saying, you have a feast already prepared for you because of what Jesus did for you on the cross. What then can you not fast from now? Let me give an illustration. Let me explain this. My wedding. Seems like a long time ago. My wedding had amazing food at it. Really amazing. I'm being totally objective. I've been to many weddings, but the food was amazing. We picked it out ourselves. We didn't go like with normal wedding food, like in America, the dry chicken thing. We didn't do that. We went like overboard on our budget, and we went out to a restaurant. We did this fusion thing, and we picked out all these great flavors, and the menu was going to be fantastic, and I knew it. I knew this was going to be fantastic. And I was waiting for it. So I'm with my groomsmen in the room as we're getting ready for the wedding, about an hour before the wedding. And if you know anything about having a wedding, it's a busy day, so you don't really get to eat. I didn't get to eat. I was famished. My groomsmen were hungry because I made them do a lot of work, so they didn't even get a chance to eat. And all the while, I know in my head that this great, wonderful feast is coming, and I'm like, this is going to be fantastic. I can't wait. I mean, I want to get married, and then we have good food, too. It's win-win for everybody. And I still remember to this day, one of my groomsmen pulls out a package of Twinkies. Twinkies. Everybody knows what Twinkies are, right? If you don't, oh man, pity you. He pulls out a package of Twinkies, which come in twos, right? He pulls out a package of 2 Twinkies. And he starts to open the package. And I look at him and I say, Dave, what are you doing? There's this great meal. Do you not trust me that this is going to be good food? Why are you eating that now? It's junk. And, he defied me and continued to shove the Twinkies in his mouth. And he ate all the Twinkies. And I think he actually snuck a pack in another pack in when I wasn't looking because he didn't want to get chastised for his Twinkie eating. And lo and behold, at the actual wedding, he came up to me and said, my stomach kind of hurts. I wish I hadn't eaten the Twinkies and then I could eat this food because everybody's raving about the food. And he ate a little bit of it, but he still says to this day that he should have never eaten the Twinkies. Why do I bring up the Twinkies? Because this is what fasting is. You and I have tickets to the ultimate feast. The feast of all feasts, where you'll sit down with the one who made you, the one who loved you, the one who loves you now. And he says, if you know that you're going to go to that feast, why then do you satiate yourself on spiritual Twinkies now? What spiritual Twinkie can you not just throw down to the ground? What is it that holds you? What good thing has become the ultimate thing that's going to take away your appetite for the feast? The feast is there. It's ready for you and me. And it costs something. It didn't cost you anything. It cost Jesus everything. On the cross, Jesus, instead of bread, got the vinegar. When he was tempted, the devil said, the angels take care of you. On the cross, nobody took care of him. When the devil tempted him, he said, you can have all this control and power. On the cross, he lost all of that control and power. And he did it for you and me. If that's the reality that we can live under, that the feast that we're going to have costs that much, what spiritual Twinkies are in your life right now that you can't throw away? You can plant your foot. You can fast. See, now fasting looks much more like joy to you now than it does drudgery, does it not? Your hunger pains would be nothing compared to his pains on the cross for you. If you let that sink in, that you have the keys to the feast, you have a ticket, it's already punched. You need not stuff your mouth with things now. You can fast. You'll have freedom to put it down, turn it off, walk away. You have freedom to fast. As I conclude, let that truth sink in. that when he was offered everything, he got nothing, so that you and I might be given everything at the cost of his life. But as I conclude, we said we're doing this in community, and of course, some of you guys are plugged into small groups. Good. I hope more of you do. Fasting is a solitary act, yet it can be done in community. I'm going to encourage you this week, very practically, to partner up with somebody. Talk about doing a fast. It may be a fast from one meal. It may be a fast from your phone. As you can see, that's sometimes painful for people. You can fast from whatever you like, but do this in community, because in community, what you'll find are a couple things. One, accountability. And two, I guarantee if you begin to fast, you will, in a community setting, you will start to get insights into the lives of others around you that you never had before. You can fast. You can give it up, because he already gave it up for you. We're going to pray, and then I'm going to ask Haley to come forward. What I want you to do for this final song is sit, reflect. You can follow the words on the screen if you want. You don't have to sing along. She's going to give us a musical offering. And I want you to reflect on this message. Reflect on what fasting will look like in your life, in light of the cross, in light of the gospel. Go with me in prayer now.